We all enjoy watching a movie, be it action, horror, drama, sci-fi, and so on, to escape reality and entertain ourselves for a few hours. Others watch documentaries to enlighten and educate themselves. The sad reality is that more often than not, films are made with hidden messages and seriously and dangerously prejudice certain groups of people who are demonized and portrayed as the evil in the world. The amazing thing is that the people creating these movies are in fact the real monsters. Americans, especially during the last century, have been responsible for the murder and death of countless millions of innocent people in their lust for power and profit, ignoring the pain, suffering, and death they have caused in their pursuit of wealth and power. The Zionist Israelis and Christian Zionists are no better and have caused unimaginable destruction, pain, death, and loss to the Palestinian people. The most disturbing thing here is that the Jewish nation has suffered greatly at the hands of Nazi Germany, yet today, they inflict even worse atrocities against the Palestinians. Just looking at films produced during the last century, a pattern can be found of how films and Hollywood hide and cover up the truth and reality of what is actually happening in this world by constantly portraying America as the great hero and savior of the world, by constantly producing films about the Jews and portraying them as the eternal victims of prejudice in the world, when in fact it is the exact opposite. Let's look at some numbers of how many films have been made in the last century that actually portray the aggressors as the heroes instead of the other way around. Over the last century, more than 440 films have been produced that depict the Holocaust. This figure comes from Rich Brownstein, a lecturer on Holocaust film for Yad Vashem's International School for Holocaust Studies and author of Holocaust Cinema Complete, which analyzes over 400 of these films. Surprisingly, the majority of these films were produced since 1980. Approximately 300 films have been produced that portray Middle Eastern terrorism, again mainly since 1980. Middle Eastern terrorism never existed until America and the West started invading Middle Eastern countries, murdering their citizens, and stealing their resources. Jewish terrorism existed since the 1st century, and even as early as the late 1890s, committing acts of terrorism against the British by blowing up a hotel and bombing and destroying an American military ship. Where are the films portraying these acts of terrorism? The current Israeli IDF was established from a few of the numerous Jewish terrorist organizations. 100 films have been produced that prominently feature Israel, its military, intelligence services, or Israeli characters, as the key agents of rescue, justice, or heroism. Over the last century, anywhere between 6,000 to 10,000 films have been produced portraying America and Americans as heroes and saviors in films varying from war movies, superhero films, political thrillers, action blockbusters, and disaster films. Amazingly, they are made to look like heroes, especially in war movies where in reality they were the invaders and initiators of those wars. Post 9/11, the majority of all these American and Jewish movies have been made. Fewer than 100 films have been produced that depict Middle Eastern Muslims as heroes or victors, especially in a central and dignified role. All of these films are regional cinema mainly produced by Egyptian, Turkish, Syrian, or Iranian filmmakers. Over 900 films in the last century have portrayed Muslims, particularly Arab or Middle Eastern Muslims, as villains or antagonists, especially in Western cinema. Dr. Jack Shaheen, a prominent scholar, reviewed over 1,000 Hollywood films in his landmark study, Real Bad Arabs: How Hollywood Vilifies a People, 2001, updated in 2009. He found over 900 films from the early 20th century to the early 2000s that portray Arabs and Muslims in stereotypical negative roles, often as terrorists, evil oil sheikhs, misogynists, or religious fanatics. A breakdown of these anti-Muslim, anti-Arab movies is as follows: 1920s to 1970s, 150 plus produced; 1980s to 1990s, 300 plus movies produced; 2000s to 2010s, 300 plus movies produced; post 9/11 boom, 200 plus movies produced. Over the last century, barely a handful of Western productions have released films that portray Muslims in a positive light, and these are mainly in documentary form when covering religion or biographical contexts. Almost every new Hollywood movie in recent years seems to have Zionist, ex-IDF, or Zionist supporters in lead roles in new films being produced. A good example of the hypocrisy and pro-Israel narrative is the awarding of a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to Gal Gadot, who as an actress is mediocre at best, while older, better-deserving stars have been overlooked for the same honor. It is not such a surprise that all the above has transpired, as most of Hollywood is financed predominantly by Zionist Jewish backers and owners of the studios. The same has been done in the past in films about America's Wild West, where the Native Americans were shown as savages, and the occupiers were shown as the heroes. The same was done when the British invaded India and starved millions of people in Australia, where the Aboriginal people were occupied and genocided, and in every other country, where the so-called civilized West has colonized another nation and demolished the native people to those lands. Let's not forget about Vietnam, Japan, Mexico, and so much more. All were colonialist projects, yet today's youth who live fantasy lives and who rarely open a book or look into history, real history, are brought up believing what they see portrayed in film, rather than seeing the reality of the world we live in. Hollywood brainwashing and normalizing Islamophobia, hatred against Arab nations, and the destruction and genocide of Palestine and the Palestinian people is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. It is time to open our eyes and see the truth behind the films we watch and the narratives they push.